Alexander Solzhenitsyn once said, "For us in Russia, communism is a dead dog, while for many people in the West, it is still a living lion." Keep this in mind as we discuss today the latest confrontation between the US and Russia near the Russia's border. Why is that important for you to understand and how that might impact you? My name is Dr. David Oualaalou.
And my name is Dr. Ross Stewart.
And you are watching Geopolitics in Conflict.
Well, David, here we are. The terrible, frightening Russian lion is at our door again to terrify us every minute of our lives. And the latest confrontation occurred recently when a Russian warship who was tracking a U.S. Navy ship chased them out of Russian territory.
That's correct, Ross. This latest confrontation just occurred about a few days ago near the Gulf of Peter the Great, which is on the Russian borders. Actually, a Russian claimed that territory. It's part of its waters. And why is that dangerous? It's because close provocations with Russia have been occurring for the last couple of years, as a matter of fact, between even airplanes coming closer to the ships and so forth. Now, this latest a confrontation, that was when the Admiral Vinogradov, which is a Russian submarine, tracked the movement of the U.S. vessel near Russia's borders. And he has to chase it out of the Russian waters, the Sea of Japan, basically.
Do you really think that the locating systems of the U.S. Navy are so faulty that they don't know when they're going into another country's territorial waters?
Well, that's a good point. Actually, they do know where they're going. The big picture of all this has nothing to do just with Russia itself. This stems from so-called the territory of NATO. Recently, a report just came out, and I had a chance to read it. And in it, it disclosed that Russia's activities near its borders constitute a danger to NATO's borders. Since when
does
NATO's border?
NATO has borders?
Yeah, sort of kind of expanded all the way to Vladivostok and the Black Sea. Well, those are Russian territories, closer to its periphery per se. So that's a dangerous game as to NATO expanding that far and claiming that it's a threat to its territory. So
there's so much to talk about here about. Does NATO really need Russia as an enemy?
Well, actually, Russia has always been NATO's enemy, even way back before communism. Now, of course, before the fall of communism, back then, the competition, the ideology between the Soviet Union and the United States was driven by that fact. Of course, back then, the Soviet Union had the Warsaw Pact and the United States had NATO. But after 1991, with the disintegration of the Soviet Union, it became the question of what is the role of NATO now that Russia doesn't,
Exactly.
Soviet Union cease to exist. And I recall reading in the article, in the report rather, and even before that, I remember this one when the late Senator Richard Lugar, who was the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, and he said, and I quote, back then, he said that NATO will have to go out of area or go out of business.
Well, they went out of area.
They went out of area. And even for us in the United States, we kind of didn't hold or didn't keep our promise by saying to the Russians, we will not expand eastwards. And yet we went back on that and went all the way near Russia's borders. So you can just see why these tensions are these provocations are very dangerous, because it will be just a matter of some miscalculation. Somebody's going to fire, and it will be too late to even control the outcome. That's
You know,
what
we
they
had
can
so
do.
many near misses during the Cold War, which never stopped.
Well, that's correct, and this is why now you start to see some dynamics within what's going on in Europe. I mean, even for NATO and for the viewers to understand, the question has always been, what are we getting out of NATO in the first place?
A purpose.
Yeah, well, if the purpose is to expand around the world at the expense of American citizens, I don't see what the justification for that. Mind you that what the US government is not reporting is that the budget of NATO, the United States government by itself spends over 70% of NATO's budget.
You know, interestingly enough, we talked to German people in Germany, and they're saying, thank you, U.S. You go, well, for what for? I said, well, you take care of so much of our defense that we can devote it to education, to health care, to infrastructure, because we've got the money.
Yeah, and that's problematic because now NATO is arguing that, well, we're going to have to worry about Russia's defense spending and China's defense spending. Come on, let's be real here.
You know, Putin just recently, last year, announced, well, we're increasing our defense spending to $50 billion.
And yet, for us, we spend over $756 billion. That's, you combine 10 members of NATO, and they won't even reach that.
It's even worse than that.
Yeah, you can't even get to that. So basically, what NATO's doing now is they're trying to figure out some new mission, if you will, to justify its existence. You know, Russia has always, or the Soviet Union has always been the enemy of NATO. So even with the fall of communism or the disintegration of Russia, of the Soviet Union, still Russia is NATO's #1 enemy.
Right after the Soviet Union transitioned to Russia, they asked to join NATO.
That's correct. I do remember that one. And yet,
they were summarily dismissed. No, you're still our enemy. What?
yeah, and that's the concern now. Now, for all this, why is this even important for us to talk about and for our viewers to understand is that what's in it for us Americans? You know, most Americans, most of us have no idea how much money is spent on NATO at the expense of average citizen. So, if your hard-earned dollars are spent on some far land interests that have nothing to do with the United States interest, well, that's going to bring some sort of, it needs to have some debates and some questions to the rationale as to why are we doing that? So why are we spending that much on NATO?
Russia's decided they're going to defend their territory. China's going to defend their close-in territory. The United States is involved with every country in the world.
Which is the smart way for Russia and China, because they will be strategically well prepared to defend their countries. For the United States, because the question that comes among some academicians and analysts and so forth, is the United States military there to protect the United States, the territory of the United States, or is it there to push for some advance ideology of sort or expansion elsewhere?
I was talking to somebody in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and we questioned him. I actually had 3 hours with him, which was really remarkable. And I said, well, what is the purpose of all this? And he said, well, we want to be prepared for a two-front war. What? Where?
Yeah.
And why should we be involved with it?
Exactly, and that's the question that's been now asked. Why are we going around looking for conflicts? Well, here is the answer that might shock you. The answer is that after World War II, starting in 1952, it became almost indoctrinated that the U.S. will have to maintain conflict constantly. In other words, the United States will have to be involved in one conflict after another. So if we are to go back to 1952, and you see historically what comes after that, we got Korean War.
Oh, that was a real win.
Yeah, Vietnam War.
Oh, another one we Lost.
Iraq won,
Oh, what a tragedy that, an expensive tragedy.
Iraq 2, and Afghanistan.
So, a sinkhole
yeah.
that just, it's actually a black hole sucking American lives and sucking
That's correct.
American treasure.
So if you look at it this way, what all those 5 conflicts have in common? The United States didn't win any of them.
Right.
And yet the spending that went into these conflicts is astronomical.
It's in the trillions of dollars.
So can you just imagine taking those trillions and reinvest them right here at home? So this is why we decided to talk about this, because the viewer, you need to understand what's at stake here. And because hard-earned dollars of the American citizens shouldn't be just wasted like this. And this is where my big concern and danger, as I argued in one of my books, one of my concern is that somebody is going to goof off, somebody's going to miscalculate, and before you know it, things will be out of control.
Let me quote one of your books. The title of the book is The Dynamics of Russia's Geopolitics, Remaking the Global Order.
Oh, that's the forthcoming one.
Forthcoming book.
That's correct, yeah.
Let us start by stating the obvious. The Cold War never ended. The West needs to reconsider its claim that it won the Cold War. There is much evidence to the contrary. The annexation of Crimea proved that the Cold War is back, and the West should not pretend otherwise. Like many geopolitical observers, I strongly believe that Russia's annexation of Crimea represents the new Iron Curtain. This time round, that line is drawn in Eastern Europe rather than in its center. From a military perspective, this line is where the geopolitical discourse and conversation with the West end. The military confrontation begins. End of quote.
Yeah, that's how I see it going, Ross. I mean, moving forward, again, the big concern, not only from a military perspective for the confrontation, but the concern also of what it's going to do to us here at home, you know, with all the economic tensions we are going through. So, and yet the government find it upon itself to go and spend the money right and left on stuff that have nothing to do with our interests. You know, the Russians didn't come over here and try to establish a base near Florida. So at least if that would be the case, then we will react, of course.
Right.
But to go all the way halfway around the world and look for conflicts, that's problematic, and that is the reason why we decided to.
And it looks like active provocation.
Well, just I mean, do you remember the recent one in Taiwan?
Oh,
You know, it's just, why are we doing what are we doing? This kind of game is not a smart thing to do. And we need to be very, very careful with that, because once again, a miscalculation is going to go out of control.
Here's the bottom line, a question for everybody. Does having another open confrontation with another nuclear power this time serve you as an American citizen?
Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other videos, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching.
And as always, stay informed.